Hello, good afternoon.
Presentation now on the status of comprehensive operational analysis. If you thought you had done the Zoom meetings, sorry, this is a Zoom presentation. So be careful, you're on camera.
And you're being recorded. So, yes. Hold on a second, Boris. Let me get. Okay.
Once he starts talking, how do you go by that?
Yes, I'm just trying to get it so that I've got a. So he's out of the way. All right, Boris, you should be good.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for sharing your lunch with me and Sarah today to kind of talk you guys through where we are in this project and some next steps and some concepts that we've come up with that we're going to be sharing with the public and other stakeholders in a couple of weeks. Sarah and I will be there on site on the 17th and 18th of this month. We'll be holding a series of public and stakeholder meetings where we will be going through 2 service improvement scenarios that we've come up with. Just as a reminder, the idea is that we have 2 scenarios now, but we understand that neither of the scenarios will likely satisfy everybody. But what we're trying to get out of these scenarios is to understand what specific elements of each scenario people like and dislike, so that we can then come back in a couple of months and present a preferred final scenario, which incorporates the most popular elements from the 2 preliminary scenarios. So we'll be presenting in person, but we've also got a survey up. It'll go live this week. And what's on the screen now, can everybody see my screen? Can you guys, yeah, okay. So what's on the screen now is the survey that Sarah's put a lot of work into to put together. The survey has kind of 4 tabs, and we just want to present this so all of you are familiar with it, so that if your constituents or clients or whatever ask about it, you'll have some idea of how this is all put together. So there's kind of an intro page that explains that Kalamazoo Metro is now going through the process of trying to find put together ideas of how to serve the region better, to improve bus service for current and prospective riders. And so there's 2 scenarios that we're presenting. We're introducing this concept of microtransit. I think we talked about that last time when Sarah and I were there in town. And we're asking people to look through the scenarios and then provide input. So first, there's a tab that has the system maps. So you have the current system map, and then you have the 2 scenario system maps. And I believe that Kathy provided those to you guys as well in hard copy. So people can look at those kind of to see the big picture, but then they can go through the next tab and look through the proposals route by route. So for example, you can go through and click route 1, route 2, route 3, and so on. And what you see is in yellow, the existing route, and then you see in red scenario 1 of that route, and in blue scenario 2 of that route. And so people can play around with it. They can zoom in and out. They can see some of the key points of interest. So if they click on any of the icons, they can see that it's an apartment complex or a medical facility or whatever the case may be. And once they've gone through and sufficiently familiarize themselves with the routes, they can provide input on the final tab. So we're asking them to say, if they would like to say, they don't have to fill in anything they don't want to, but if they would like to, they can say, I prefer scenario 1 overall or scenario 2 overall, or they can go through and pick a specific route, and they can provide feedback on just that specific route. So for route 2 Portage, I prefer scenario 1 or scenario 2, and so on. There's a question about how appropriate they think microtransit is to as a solution here in Kalamazoo, and then it wraps up with some demographic questions. So that's how the survey works. I'll just pause real quick to see if anyone has any questions just about the survey, and then afterwards we can go through the individual routes in the two scenarios. So any questions in the survey?
We don't see any.
Okay. So if that's the case, we'll go through today while you guys eat and kind of talk through the scenarios themselves. We'll start with route 1, and we'll see what the best way to do this is, whether it's to go through route by route through an entire scenario, or go route 1, scenario 1, scenario 2, but we can play it by ear. But as a starting point, what's on the screen now is a map of the region. So you have this boundary here, this green boundary, that's the urban portion of your region. So the urban portion is where your fixed routes are concentrated. You have some color coding shown here. So that the color coding is density. So areas that are red and orange are more dense in terms of activity, in terms of housing, than areas that are yellow or green. And then you have points of interest for reference. Those are the types of land uses that we know generate a lot of transit trips. So multifamily housing, apartment complexes, major retail centers, educational facilities, and the like. So those are there for context. What I've shown here is route 1. So I'll turn it on and off a little bit. Maybe a bit hard to see from where you guys are, so you might follow along on the maps that you have. And then we can overlay that with the existing route 1 alignment. And so you can kind of quickly see some of the differences. So the main differences for route 1 from what's happening today, one main difference is the alignment by the mire that's on Westnedge. So the current alignment goes when it's heading south and west on Westnedge, it turns onto Old Kilgore Road. There's a stop here, and then it has to make an unprotected left turn onto Kilgore Road and then back south onto Westnedge. This is a difficult turn to make, especially from Old Kilgore onto Kilgore, because it isn't a protected intersection. So buses have to make a left without the benefit of a light there. So we are proposing to eliminate that turn and to instead have kind of a more streamlined, somewhat simplified alignment where the vehicle actually goes onto the property. That's not what we typically recommend going onto the property, but in some cases it's better than any other alternative. So in this case, if buses are coming down Westnedge, they can turn onto Old Kilgore. That's a signalized intersection. They can go in front of the mire, come out onto Andy Avenue. Andy and Westnedge is also a signalized intersection. So they have the benefit of 2 signalized intersections, which will make it a more predictable service, easier for drivers to make that turn. The other change proposed on this route is that there's currently a deviation that happens a couple of times a day to the adult education facility. It has very, very low ridership. So we actually have the ridership here to show you. On average, about 2 people a day are using this stop. So we are proposing to streamline the route and keep it on Westnedge because it's such low ridership at that adult education center. So that is route 1, and that's kind of that's actually the same for the scenario 2 of that route. That route doesn't change based on scenario 1 and scenario 2. Any questions on that route? Okay. So we'll move on then to route 2. Yep.
One question. We do have a question.
Going into Myers, Myers is okay with this?
So this hasn't been discussed with Myers yet. So with these preliminary scenarios, the idea is we identify strengths and weaknesses. We identify issues with the current route, and then we come up with recommendations to address them. As we come back out on the 17th and 18th, and we meet with stakeholders and the public and so on, we may get pushback from some of these ideas, and in some cases that'll kind of inform us to go with scenario 1 or scenario 2, or maybe scrap an idea altogether. So we don't yet have feedback from Meyer. We wanted to put this out there and see how the discussion goes, but certainly we'd have to check with Meyer about that alignment.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have
One additional start.
Is there any, have we ever considered doing like a center median? Westage has a median there. Could we do a stop in the middle and just keep that bus on Westage, not have to bring it through there? That just seems like the shopping carts coming through that area where they're proposing to drive. I understand why the proposed change is there, but it'd be great if we could keep that on Westage. Is there any sort of innovative concept to have a center median with like a pedestrian signal in the middle of that block? And I don't know if we ever looked at that now.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing there is an element of what often is called bus rapid transit, so BRT type service. Bus rapid transit does often take, it's different than regular bus service in that it typically has some sort of median, some sort of dedicated running way or dedicated right of way. So oftentimes that isn't a median. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to go into that to make it safe. For example, if you run in the median, you would also have to have essentially platforms for passengers to board and to load and unload in the median. So you'd have to have enough space, not just for the running way of the bus, but also for a platform for people to make their way to that busway. So it's a good concept. Maybe a longer term concept. I think that there's an argument to be made that you could even operate along Westnedge just on the outside lanes, like a normal operation, and have stops at signalized intersections. So a bus operating in the right lane just stops here. A person could cross at a signalized intersection, make their way to the Meyer. That's something to be considered as well. We don't necessarily have to go into the Meyer. We're just trying to get as close as we possibly can to it.
Yeah, just if anybody's driven that stretch in front of that Meyer store, it's going to be a constant flow of people in and out of that building in front of the bus.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like
I mean, another solution would be to put a signal at Kilgore and Old Kilgore, because that's fundamentally the problem now, that the buses are having to make a left turn without a signal. So that's another option as well. But short of that, we thought that's an issue. So this is a potential solution.
But is it that Old Kilgore is not signaled off of Westnedge? So aren't you just trading one left turn for another?
So when you're making a left turn onto Old Kilgore, you are turning from the median. You have to yield to oncoming traffic in one direction only, which, that's also not perfect, but it's much better than coming from a full stop and having to cross both directions of traffic on West Kilgore as a bus is going from full stop to left, to left turn. So it's a both of them ideally would have a signal. But actually, Old Kilgore, I believe, no, Old Kilgore does not have a signal. But like I said, it's only yielding to one direction of traffic.
I was wondering if there's a compromise between Eric's suggestion, Kurt's suggestion of staying on Westage and running right up against north-south against Meyer. It looks like there's north-south access on the west side of the Meyer parking lot, on the east side of Westnedge. Would that be a compromise that that could get you through, past Meyer without jutting in front of people with shopping carts and children?
Yeah, so that was considered. The only problem there is there's a median here. So if you were to, you can't. I don't believe you can turn in to here. You can turn out, that's true. Like you can go northbound. I don't believe you can come in southbound to here. So that was one problem. But we could consider something like coming in, in the way that it's shown here, but then jutting over like that. That's a possibility.
That's what my thought was.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Will likely be a faster way through that parking lot. Up near the building is quite a lot of foot traffic. That's our condition.
Just a comment, really. I know we have the route, the whole road route at our Myers, and I know, correct me if I'm wrong, the bus goes right along in front of Myers, and I don't know the traffic difference, but I don't think there's been any issues up there.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Let's move to Route 2. Okay. So Route 2, the Portage route, the proposal under scenario 1 is to operate it between Kalamazoo Transit Center and the Portage Walmart, which differs from the current scenario. The current scenario ends around Sprinkle Road, and so the idea here is to realign the route in a couple of sort of important ways. Number one, in the downtown area, what we're proposing is to realign the route from Pitcher, Portage Street to Rose, Jesper, Burdick, and Alcott Street. And the idea there is to provide better service to Bronson Methodist Hospital right here, because right now Bronson is not served by this route. I should also back up and mention that the concepts that we're presenting, the idea is to make every route a very strong standalone route. In other words, when you have a series of strong standalone routes, the entire network benefits, because every route potentially does well on its own. Put those together as a network, then you have a very strong network. To make a strong standalone route, you need a good mix of origins and destinations. You need routes that serve multifamily housing, medical facilities, retail centers, educational facilities. So we try to put as many of those types of land uses onto every route to give it the best possible chance of being a strong standalone route. So in this case, by realigning, so the yellow thinner line is the proposed alignment versus the thicker one, which is the current. We're trying to provide closer access to a large medical facility, and in that way to generate more ridership on this route. So the other piece of this is this Alcott Road, which is Alcott Street right here. So there's a DHS, the Department of Health and Human Services facility on this road. Right now, it's served by Route 13. So this red line is the Route 13 alignment. The only issue with Route 13 serving that route is that it forces a big deviation of the route. And so what we're trying to accomplish is to still serve this area, but serve it in a way that doesn't feel like a huge out of the way deviation. And so that can be accomplished by taking the 2 and crossing over Alcott, and then taking the 13 and crossing over Alcott again in the opposite direction. So the two routes basically pass each other at Alcott, but the result is that neither one of those routes is going in and out of Alcott in a way that feels like a very big deviation. So we'll come back to 13, but that's the Route 2 change on the north end. On the south end, the current route ends in an area that has a lot of job access opportunities, some multifamily housing as well, Sprinkle Road. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't serve the airport area very well. And the airport itself is also a job access opportunity, not necessarily the airport alone, but a lot of the other businesses around the airport, the rent-a-car facilities, the hotels, things like that. Those are all job access opportunities. So by taking Route 2 south on Portage, it creates opportunity to serve the airport better. It also creates opportunity to serve the Stryker campus, which is another job access opportunity. And then at the end, we end the route at the at the Walmart on the Portage Walmart, and that allows for a stronger anchor on Shaver Road. So stronger anchor, linking a strong anchor to more residential and job access opportunities. That's the concept of this Route 2. So Now in scenario 2, there's a lot of similarities, but one difference. In scenario 2, the route actually ends at the airport. And the reason for that is that in scenario 2, we're also proposing microtransit service. So microtransit, as we talked about earlier or last time, is a concept that's similar to Uber and Lyft, but it uses transit vehicles to provide on-demand service through a smartphone app with a phone-in option available as well. In the main difference between the whole concept of scenario 1 and scenario 2 is that scenario 2 includes 4 microtransit zones on 4 different sides of the service area. That allows us to kind of cut back the fixed route service to where it has the greatest likelihood of being productive, and that's the more like the inner core of the service area. So in the case of Route 2, the southern microtransit zone allows us to truncate the route by the airport and allow for coverage south of the airport to be picked up in part by the microtransit service. I'll pause there, but any comments about Route 2, either scenario 1 or scenario 2?
Mr. Sharp.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I've been talking about this for about 6 years, about, I don't know how many times a year, about Portage Road and Portage Street. Portage Street in the city of Kalamazoo, Portage Road in the city of Portage. And linking that our hub at the transit center out to one of our largest, if not the largest, employment hubs in the region, and that's the area south of the airport. So I like what's being proposed. I think the idea of linking it into the airport is critical. You've got people there that are arriving or departing without vehicles, and the rental car facility is another active space there in addition to the airlines. So having that service is great. To me, I'm not the expert in this, but I would run it straight down Portage Road past Pfizer down to Center, and you've got two large apartment complexes on Center Avenue that you can service as well, in addition to getting farther south toward that lakes area and catching an employment hub with 2,500 people working at it. And you also avoid that left turn that we're just talking about avoiding on Kilgore Service Road. You're adding a left turn on Lover's Lane there that's unprotected by going down Stryker Way. There's nothing along Lover's Lane that you're picking up from a destination standpoint that's anything in comparison to the size of Pfizer.
Right.
So I would run that straight down Portage Road to Center. I think there's so many opportunities to pick up and then continue your route from there. Running it into Stryker Way.
Yep. So that is a concept we looked at as well. I think that's probably I'm glad I'm hearing this feedback because I wasn't sure about 2 things. Number one, I wasn't sure how you guys saw Stryker as a potential ridership generator in the future. If it's something that would generate ridership, and if so, would the people that are riding to Stryker be very sensitive to walk distance? So in other words, how critical is it to go kind of through their facility versus close enough, which might be the case on Portage Road? And so any thoughts on that first?
Well, I mean, I can give some. I don't want to be the only one talking here, but that facility is an office facility, and the distance from Portage Road into is not long. It's a large site, but walking from Portage Road into that facility is an easy process with nice trails that go into it. Walking from where that turn happens to the Pfizer campus is much longer. And the possibility of higher ridership at Pfizer is going to be greater than at Stryker, I think. And
okay,
the Pfizer facility is 2,500 manufacturing positions. So to me, and you also pick up FedEx if you go a little farther south. And
there's also KRISA. Does KRISA have an office there on Romans? Between Portage and
it's on Mellon.
Mellon.
At school on Mellon office, yeah.
Okay, yep, that's great. The only other lost opportunity is that there's this housing called Oak Brooks Estate Mobile Home Park, which is on Lovers. And you know, it's not huge. Maybe these apartment complexes would probably generate more ridership, but that was kind of the trade-off here, that if we come down Lovers, then at least some of the apartments would still be within walking distance of Lovers. But I think that it may be a worthy trade-off to do Center plus Pfizer in exchange for this mobile home park on Lovers, particularly if the idea of microtransit, you know, gets some resonance. So
I think those two apartment complexes in Portage, representatives, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they were mission funded. I think one's a senior focused housing complex, and they're both relatively large. So grabbing those, I think, would be pretty good.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll just reiterate what you said there. Particularly where the orange dot is now, I guess, is a low income, like a line-tech property where I suspect people probably rely on fixed route service, but I couldn't say for sure. And the mobile home area that you're picking up by going down Lovers is age restricted. Those may be folks who are more likely to do our Metro Connect as opposed to the fixed line service. So I think that's 55 up, community might be 60 up.
Okay, very good.
Can you explain to us again the difference between microtransit and our Metro Connect?
So microtransit, first of all, the biggest difference is the technology component. So microtransit is based on a technology platform that allows the users to directly dispatch the vehicle from their smartphone or whatever other device. They can see where vehicles are after they make the reservation. So it's a very similar interface to Uber and Lyft. So there's kind of this there's a transparency to it where there's not a fear of the unknown. People know where the vehicle is. People know when it's coming. The other thing is that microtransit does not require pre-booking in the same way that most other types of on-demand services do, especially the on-demand types of services that go through a dispatcher. So you don't have to book a day in advance. You don't have to book a couple days in advance. You just book when you're ready to go. And typically vehicles are available within 30 minutes or less. So those are the main differences. Okay.
If I jump in real quick and Sean, for all the members here, if you do have comments, and we have quite a few routes here, if you want to just jot down your comments with your name too, we'll also collate those into all of our pieces too, because there's quite a bit to go through. We want to make sure to capture all of your thoughts, which are good.
Okay, well, I'll try to speed it up a little bit. All right, so let's turn off the microtransit zone. Let's look at scenario 1, route 3. So route 3, what we're proposing is to actually split the route into 2 separate routes. And the reason for that is that the current, I'll turn on 31. So we're calling it 31 and 32. With a 31, both of them are anchored at WMU. 31 heads out to 11th Street, and then 32 heads from WMU on Michigan and then up Drake Street to serve some of the apartment communities that are south of Main Street. That differs from the current Route 3. The current Route 3 looks like this, where you have a large loop. So let me turn off what I have on here, 333, I'll turn that off. So yeah, the current route from WMU does this loop on 11th Street, goes up Drake, goes into the Maple Hill Pavilion, but also serves the apartments south of Main Street, also serves the Harding's Market there. But on the way back, it does not come back through 11th Street. It goes directly from Drake Street to Michigan. So the result of the current alignment is people are forced right out of direction. So if you live in the apartment complexes on 11th Street, for example, and you're trying to make your way to campus, you have to first ride up to the retail, the Maple Hill Pavilion, before you can make your way to campus. If you're at the Maple Hill Pavilion, you're trying to get home to 11th Street, you have to ride through campus before you're ultimately able to make it to 11th Street. So that doesn't really work well as a combined route, which is why we're proposing instead to split it into 2 separate routes, 31, and 32. So that's kind of the main takeaway there. The other thing is that we're proposing to run it through Century. Is it I believe it's Avenue, right? Century Avenue. And Century Avenue, there's a Trader Joe's there, there's a Costco there. And as you'll see moving forward, this is kind of going to emerge as a important secondary hub. In other words, a lot of routes will run through Century Avenue. It becomes a point where people can make connections from routes that are serving places other than the university to routes that are serving the university. So if you make it to Century Avenue, you can make that jump to a shuttle that gets you to the university. But you'll see more and more, this is going to be an emerging hub. And we marked it on, if you have your maps in front of you, we actually marked it as an important hub on there as well. So that's 31 and 32. The 30, in this scenario, the focus of Route 32 is really getting people from off-campus housing to campus. We're not proposing sending it up to the Maple Hill Pavilion because there's another route that would go up to the Maple Hill Pavilion. Oops, sorry, let me bring that up. So this route here, which is Route 72, I'll turn, it's a little bit hard to see. I'll just turn that on. That's another route that would end at Century Avenue. And so that would create an opportunity. If you're on campus, you can make your way to Century Avenue, jump on, transfer to another route 72, that'll serve the Maple Hill Pavilion area. But in scenario one anyway, routes 31 and 32 does not serve the pavilion.
That route does not, 31 does not go to transit center?
No, so no, these two routes, both 31 and 32, are their main hub is WMU. So in scenario two, real quick, there's some similarities. So in scenario two, we don't have Route 3 split into two. It's just Route 3, but it's Route 3 that goes from the university along Michigan Avenue, up Drake, and then loops the Maple Hill Pavilion and then back. And the reason for that is that in scenario two, you have a different route that is serving the 11th Street corridor. So that's actually Route 4. So we'll talk about Route 4 next. But if Route 4 is serving the 11th Street facility, then it's not necessary to have both Route 3 and Route 4 serve the 11th Street facility.
So my question is, if you're a student on campus, how do you get downtown?
Okay, yeah, great question. So we haven't got there yet, but we'll talk about that in a minute. There's the short answer is that in this route, or in this scenario, Route 11 has that function. So Route 11 provides service from downtown, and then it comes into the university along West Michigan Avenue and Ring Road. This would be kind of the transfer opportunity to get to campus. We are proposing redesigning some of the shuttles around campus. I suppose we can, I'll turn those on here in a second, 191 and 192. Those shuttles would provide much more circulation than the current circulator through campus. So from downtown, a person can make their way to campus to either continue by foot from there to, along West Michigan, or to jump on one of these circulator routes. I'll quickly talk about those circulators actually, if we're kind of going out of order here, but the current circulator Route 19, I'll turn off this one and this one. There is a circulator now that is a one-way circulator. So from campus, from the loading zone on campus, it comes out onto Ring Road North, and then it serves the School of Health and Human Services, and then it continues down to the Stadium Drive Apartments, and then it comes north and, on Stadium, and then it actually comes back on Ring Road South. So Ring Road North is served in one direction, Ring Road South is served in one direction. So on a map, it looks like it's a circulator, but in reality, it doesn't actually provide circulation through campus because you can't make your way all the way around campus. If you're trying to get to any destination on the south half of campus, it really makes very little sense because nobody's going to ride north and then all the way to Health and Human Services, all the way to Stadium Apartments to finally eventually end up on Ring Road South. So what we're proposing instead of that is to take the 19 to split it into two separate routes, calling it 191 and 192. So 191 would take the north side of the service, so Ring Road North. It would serve the Health and Human Services School, and then it would come right back. So it would be bidirectional service on the north side of campus, out and back. And then 192 would be bidirectional service on the south side of campus. So from the loading zone, it would head south on Ring Road. And then from there, it would skip the Health and Human Services. It would come on Oliver Street, but skip the School of Health and Human Services and instead go straight to the Stadium Stadium Drive Apartments, and then come back on Stadium and then down Ring Road South. So Ring Road South would have bidirectional service. So it'd go inbound and outbound, inbound and outbound. The two routes, the Ring Road South route and the Ring Road North South route would converge right here where people coming in on the Route 11 would be able to make that connection, and they could jump off the 11 and either head north or head south. So the key there is bidirectional service, which is an important factor in making transit service simple. And service that is simple is typically more attractive, more compelling. And so that's the idea here, to make the circulation through campus bidirectional and to create a transfer opportunity for people coming from other points trying to get onto campus. I know that was a lot. So any questions there?
Don't see any.
I want to go back. I need to go back to Route 3 and the suggestion that Route 4 takes over for Route 3 for 11.
Let's talk about that. Okay. So you have 3, which, okay, that's scenario 2. So 1 second.
Scenario 2, yeah, is what I'm talking about.
Yep. Okay. So here's Route 3 in scenario 2. And then let me bring up Route 4 in scenario 2. So Route 4 comes down Oakland Drive, comes along across Parkview Avenue, serves the Evergreen South Apartments here. And then as it comes up 11th Street, it ends at Century Avenue. So from that point, people can transfer to the Route 3, or there's several other routes that they could transfer to. For example, this pink route here in scenario 2, that's Route 25. We haven't talked about that yet. But if they can make their way to Century Avenue, then Route 25 will get them to campus. Route 3 will get them to campus. So there's several options to get to campus. And Route 4.
Figure out which route takes them to the grocery store.
Okay, so if they are, you mean if they're on 11th Street?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if they're on 11th Street, then Route 4 will take them to Trader Joe's. So there's Trader Joe's here.
Okay, that's not a grocery store.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
it is, but it's not. So my curiosity is getting the better of me here, but we have this section down here. Is there any discussion about connecting these sections, like 11th Street and further to the west, by 9th Street north up to West Main? I guess I thought that that's where we were going to go with some of these routes at some point, and I know I talked about it here quite a few times, Saturday Night Connector. But, you know, Trader Joe's is not really an accessible grocery store for, especially people coming out of a subsidized living area. So I'm worried about those connections, and I know that it's difficult to take everybody's needs into consideration, but I'm just kind of wondering where this is really going. So they've got a bus, where they're really taking them.
Yeah, I mean, so you've got Trader Joe's, you've got Save-A-Lot here as well. So from Drake Road, there's a opportunity for a stop on Drake Road, which then.
I know it's not there.
There's no Save-A-Lot no more.
Yeah, Save-A-Lot's not there.
Oh, it's not there anymore. Okay. So then, yeah, so you have Costco and Trader Joe's essentially. But if those are, if those don't work, then we certainly could look at other connections. That's the type of feedback we want to hear. There, in scenario 2, where 11th Street is connected just to this Trader Joe's, we do have microtransit as an option. So microtransit would link to the Walmart. So there's Walmart. No, there's Meijer there, and Walmart here. Yeah, there's the Walmart.
Harding's down at Stadium and Ninth too, so that's good. Those are pretty much more acceptable grocery stores.
Right, and those are only if we're talking about one-seat rides, right? Because we want to make sure that every route has some grocery stores, some pharmacies, everything, all of those kind of basics to survive as a one-seat ride. But then if you talk about connection opportunities, again, this area here, the Century Avenue becomes a connection hub. And so, for example, Route 11 would, if somebody makes their way from 11th Street to Century Avenue, they could jump on Route 11, which takes them to the Hardings. So it's all a matter of like, is a one-seat ride to Trader Joe's an acceptable enough? If not, then you do have the option of a transfer. But if that's also not acceptable, we want to hear that from the comments. We want to hear that from the feedback.
Well, I guess I had high hopes that there would be, like I said, a connection from that Stadium Drive up 9th Street to West Main. That would be feasible, that would, not hurt the routes in any way, that could still be efficient.
Right.
Is that at all? Because I know when Curtis was just talking about, Portage Road down to Center Street, you said that was something you had looked at. Have you guys looked at anything up 9th Street?
Sorry, so you said 9th Street?
Yeah.
We didn't look at 9th Street for that north-south connection, but if you let me look here. So scenario 1, 11th Street, the 11th Street corridor is connected again through a transfer. So the 11th Street corridor would get you to the Century Avenue, and then from there you could get up to Target and the Maple Hill Pavilion, which there's grocery access there, but that doesn't cover 9th Street. So really the only 9th Street option that we looked at was the microtransit service. In scenario 2, however, it doesn't really help the 11th Street corridor, but in scenario 2, we also did look at this connection on 9th Street. So this is a concept where Route 16, let me just isolate it by itself real quick. Route 16 would come out Michigan Avenue. So from the university, come down Michigan Avenue, and then head out to the Walmart. The trade-off there is that the current alignment of this route goes into some of these apartments. So this is what the current alignment looks like. Oops, 1 second. Yeah. So the current alignment goes into these apartments, but it doesn't go beyond the apartments to the Walmart on 9th Street. In the proposed scenario 2, we did propose a concept where instead of going into those apartments, we instead go into the Walmart here. So that, it's not exactly 11th Street, but it does touch the tip of 11th Street, but probably not what you're looking for.
No. Thank you, though.
Yeah. Again, please provide that feed. Like if you get a chance to take the survey, please provide that feedback, because that's what this whole process is about. Okay, let's get back in order. Let me turn off some of these layers. Let's talk about scenario 1, Route 5. Okay, so scenario 1, Route 5 extends Route 5 past its current end of the line. So the current end of the line of Route 5 is a small shopping center at Main and Nazareth. I believe there's a dollar store there now, but it's not a very strong anchor for the route. So in order to strengthen this route, we've extended it from that intersection up to the Walmart and the Meijer the Comstock, Walmart, and Myers. So this is an extension of the route. And that's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is quite similar with one difference. The way that it kind of circulates through is a bit different because in scenario 2, there's the assumption that there will also be a microtransit zone up here. So we have, in scenario 1, we have a Route 6 that comes all the way across G Avenue. So these apartments are served by this Route 6. And in scenario 2, that Route 6 does not go all the way across. It terminates earlier. So Route 5 does the circulation to capture the apartments up here. And then we have a microtransit zone up there as well. So that's Route 5. Otherwise, the Route 5 is quite.
I'm sorry, are you
Sorry?
ready for questions or no?
Yeah, please.
Have you looked at going by the Comstock High School facility instead of on Nazareth Road? So where the East Main route turns northbound right now onto Nazareth, it's continue farther east in front of the high school. I don't know, maybe is there demand at the high school? Is there logic in having the high school linked into the system?
We did look at that.
You did look at it, okay.
We did look at it, and in the end, the high school falls into one of the microtransit zones, and we haven't seen, when we looked at the ridership, we didn't see a lot of evidence of strong ridership there. So this is the the ridership from 2021 and then the ridership from 2019. Let's turn on 2019. Yeah, so we didn't see strong evidence of ridership out there. And for that reason, we didn't do the alignment past the high school. Instead, we chose Nazareth Road because there's multifamily housing. There's a large apartment complex called Oak Tree Apartments. And that was kind of the main reason why we chose Nazareth. But the microtransit in scenario 2 would cover the high school.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So Route 6, as I said, the main difference in, let me turn off this ridership. The main difference in Route 6 on the two scenarios is that in scenario 1, you have service going all the way across G Avenue. And in scenario 2, you have service going as far as, so there's a large apartment complex here called the Mill Park Townhomes. That's kind of, if you look at the ridership, there's a fall off in ridership past there, and then the ridership is fairly low on G Avenue. And so for that reason, we terminated the Route 6 there, and then left the rest of G Avenue open for microtransit service. And this is kind of a situation where we see that there are a lot of apartments out there, but the way that they're situated, where they're placed relative to G Avenue, they're kind of set back in many cases. And for that reason, I think some prospective transit riders are not using transit because of the pedestrian environment along G Avenue. And so microtransit may just be somewhat of a better fit. And so we ended up putting a microtransit zone in here versus the fixed route service that's in scenario 1. Okay.
I've got a question. When all microtransit going on, what kind of data can you use to support that maybe there are people that aren't using the system now that may jump on the bandwagon and then it overload the system in areas where, how would you draw that data out? Because it's kind of a nebulous, I guess.
Yeah, well, so some of the reasons that some people don't ride transit now, so if we look, for example, at Route 6 and we look at the ridership on Route 6, we can draw some conclusions that we expect there to be strong ridership when we see such large apartment communities, but then we don't see it. We don't see it materialize. And so the conclusion that we draw is that likely the pedestrian environment there is such, it's a combination of the pedestrian environment and potentially the demographics of these apartment communities. The people there may be more choice riders. Choice riders are people that are less transit dependent, but rather have different options open to them. So if they have to choose transit over driving, they'll look at what's more convenient. And if they find that the roadway and the pedestrian environment isn't very comfortable for them, in other words, if they go out, if they have to get out to Avenue G and it looks like this, and there's no sidewalks and they don't feel safe waiting for a bus, you know, in a ditch, then they'll say, okay, it's really not for me. I'm not going to use the bus. On the other hand, microtransit stands apart in that it can get to the riders. Riders don't necessarily have to go to a specific stop. Microtransit is an on-demand service. The vehicles are able to get to the riders. And so for some choice riders, that's a more compelling argument. They say, I'll use the service if it comes to me, if I'm able to, you know, go essentially door to door versus having to wait in a not a very pedestrian friendly environment. Does that help?
Quick question. Who are these drivers?
Well, there's many different options. So they could be Kalamazoo Metro employees. So there's an option of operating microtransit the same way that, for example, the Metro Connect service is operated, where it's a fully publicly funded, publicly operated service. There's also the option of what's called turnkey service, where you contract with a private provider, and it's overseen by a public entity, but there's some private contractor that's providing the actual service. So there's a variety of ways to operate it.
So then we would have to have a contract with these people before it would happen?
It wouldn't have to be. You could install the platform onto vehicles that are owned by Kalamazoo Metro, for example, and could be operated by Kalamazoo Metro drivers. And then all that would need to be added would be the software that allows it to become a directly dispatchable vehicle for the riders. So it can be a fully public service.
Within a microtransit zone, do you only travel within that zone by microtransit? Or typically elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a good question. So typically the way the microtransit zones are structured is they have the zone itself, but it always has some sort of anchor point. So for example, in this case, you have the Comstock, Meijer, and Walmart, where two of the microtransit zones come together. Those are also the opportunities for people to make connections to the larger fixed route network. So the microtransit service is designed both for local circulation and regional connections. And that's how it's structured.
So it's intended to get you to a fixed route location?
Yeah. I'm sorry, say again?
Taking me to South Portage then.
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
It wouldn't take me from the zones you're showing on the screens right now. I could catch a microtransit in that zone, but it would not take me down to Portage. Correct. So you would be able to use it within the zone, whichever zone you happen to be in. You could use it within the zone. In some cases, you could transfer from one microtransit zone to another microtransit zone. In the case of from the north to south, it might take a couple of transfers to get there. That's possible. But typically the way people use it is they use it locally for getting to local retail or groceries or whatever. But then if they need to make a more regional trip, like to downtown or whatever, then they would transfer. So the north zone is anchored both at two Walmarts and Meijers. So on the east and the west. So you could transfer here to fixed route service, you could transfer here to fixed route service, and then make your way to other points in the service area. Okay, thank you.
But, so I've liked the concept of microtransit for years, but I have a question on how it works. You have some independent contractors that work for Lyft and for what's the other one? Uber. Would these independent contractors, could they add the Metro now? How does that work in other communities that have this thing set up on microtransit?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there is some overlap, but typically the way that the microtransit service operates attracts a different group of drivers because it's much more consistent. It's much more structured the same way that the same way that Metro drivers have their schedule. You know, they work, let's say, 8 hours a day. The microtransit operators also have more of a guaranteed work shift. That doesn't mean that a microtransit driver couldn't work, you know, in microtransit during the daytime and then switch over to do Uber or Lyft in the evening. They certainly could. And there is in other communities some overlap in the type of people that end up taking microtransit type jobs. But generally it's more consistent hours. So the drivers could have like a normal schedule. They wouldn't have to, a lot of Uber drivers just work whenever they can versus having a consistent schedule. Okay.
The vehicles usually, how are they usually in microtransit? Are they personal vehicles or are they vans or how are they?
Yeah, so they look like this. This is this picture here is from Grand Rapids. This is their this is their microtransit vehicle. It's also it's the same type of vehicle they use for paratransit service. So that's what they're using in Grand Rapids. In Muskegon, Michigan, they're using minivans. So typically, and that's pretty much the range of microtransit vehicles. It's usually either minivans or like Ford Sprinter type vans, which they're using in the Detroit suburbs for microtransit service, or these cutaway body on chassis type of vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So looking at the size of the microtransit vehicles, if a customer wants to go from A to B, will the micro bus take them A to B, or does the bus pick up people along the way and not necessarily go to A and B because they're dropping off other people?
Yeah, that's a really great question. That is one of the main differences between microtransit and Uber and Lyft. Uber and Lyft operate more like a taxi service where it's one trip it starts, one trip ends, the next trip starts, the next trip ends. Microtransit is a shared ride experience. So a person, if there are 7 people that are trying to get from, I don't know, let's say from Kalamazoo Township to the Comstock Walmart, there could be one person here, one person here, one person here. So they are picked up in order, and then they're all taken to the Walmart. And the algorithm that kind of underlays the platform, the microtransit platform, it uses logic to determine how do you get all 3 people in the most efficient way possible to the same destination. So the routing is determined by the platform, by the microtransit platform. The drivers are kind of pushed instructions. The driver's told, go to destination 1, then go to destination 2. And so it's designed to be as efficient, as direct as possible, while at the same time grouping trips. Okay. So let's move on. Let's look at Route 8. Okay. So Route 8.
You missed Route 7.
Oh, did I miss Route 7? Okay. Yep. Let me go back to 7. Okay, so 7 is a route that would be split into 2, or it's proposed to be split into 2. This is the scenario 1 for Route 7. So in this case, the split is done to try to minimize the perception of out of direction travel, because the current Route 7 looks like this. So from downtown, it serves Kalamazoo Central High School. And then so that's kind of a deviation as it then continues south on Drake Road, down to retail destinations, Maple Hill Pavilion and the Hardings and so on. So to try to minimize that perception of out of direction travel, Route 7 is in both scenarios proposed to be split at the high school. So when it's split, that it could still be the same vehicle. So the same vehicle heads from downtown to the high school, but then it changes its head sign, and it changes from 71 to 72. So even though there is this deviation, people typically are more prepared for it if they kind of have that this is actually splitting, a new route from the high school down, in this case, down to the retail destinations on Century Avenue. In scenario 2, routes 71 and 72, 71 is the same. 72 differs in that instead of going down Drake after the high school and after serving the Maple Hill Pavilion area, it actually goes out to the Meijer and Walmart. So it's a different end of the line. So that's 71 and 72 in scenario 2 versus scenario 1. Okay. So that's 71 and 72. Now route 8, if we look at route 8, route 8 is a fairly circuitous alignment today. It serves quite a lot of different destinations, a lot of employment destinations. It also serves the MRC MRC Industries facility. So in scenario 1, route 8 is streamlined. So it does not serve the MRC Industries. Instead, it's streamlined and then extended to Crossroads Mall, again with the idea of making it a stronger anchor. It also operates through the Stryker facility here. It serves a lot of multifamily housing as well. So on the north side, it provides access again to Bronson Methodist Hospital, whereas the current alignment doesn't provide that direct access to the hospital. So that's on the north side. It eliminates service east of Sprinkle Road. This alignment eliminates service east of Sprinkle Road, including MRC Industries, in order to streamline the route and due to low ridership in this at MRC Industries. The end of the line is shifted from Manchester Road down to the Portage Walmart to better serve multifamily housing, and industrial destinations surrounding the airport area, which is down here, while also establishing a stronger anchor. So route 8 it looks like this in scenario 1. Now MRC Industries, it's taken off of route 8, but it is still served by a different route 10 in scenario 1, which I will show here. So MRC Industries is still served by route 10, but not by route 8. Any questions on route 8?
So that it goes through on Meredith, it looks like. Is that the cut that it's making on south of Kilgore Road? Looks like it's going, I'm just trying to get bearings, is going through the Wing Stadium Industrial, I'm farther east.
Oh, okay.
Here's Sprinkle at 94. I'm looking, yeah, okay, so it does go down Meredith, so it cuts through that residential neighborhood versus staying out on Sprinkle.
Correct, yes. And that was based on, there was existing ridership. There's a couple of large apartment complexes there. And so we wanted to get as close as possible to those. They're strong ridership generators. So in this scenario, those apartments would have a direct connection to the mall area. There's also a grocery store. I believe it's Harding. I believe it's Harding. Yeah, Harding's Market there. There's an Aldi as well. So they would have a direct connection. They'd preserve their connection to downtown. They'd have a better connection to the hospital, and they'd have better connection to retail destinations.
To one hospital, they have a better connection to one hospital.
Oh, to the Bronson, right here. Yeah, Bronson. Because the current alignment goes like this. So this is the current alignment here. So they don't have direct access to Bronson Medical Center.
Right.
Okay. So that's route 8. That's route 8 in scenario 1. In scenario 2, Route 8 looks a little bit different. Let me bring up that. So in scenario 2, Route 8 does not go all the way to the mall. And the reason for that, again, is that there would be microtransit service to help fill the gap, so to speak. So Route 8 in scenario 2 does kind of end of the line loop. This is Commercial Road here, or Commercial Avenue, I should say, Commercial Avenue and American Avenue. So it still serves these large apartment complexes, which have very high ridership. But then that's as far as it goes. Then it just turns around here and then heads right back. It's a bi-directional service. So that's a key difference between Route 8 in scenario 1 and scenario 2. Okay.
Or could you show how Route 8 works now, how it is now?
Sure. So this is the current Route 8. And I'll actually turn on the entire network. So these apartment complexes now, they have access to downtown from Route 2. They don't have access to the hospital directly, but they do have access to downtown. So under Route 8, well, this is the current Route 8, and the proposed Route 8, these folks would have access to downtown via Bronson Medical Center. Okay. Any questions about 8, or we can move on to 9? Okay, so moving on to Route 9 in scenario 1. So in scenario 1, Route 9 operates between the between downtown Kalamazoo and the Gull Road Walmart, which is not that different than what's happening today. But as you can see, the current alignment has several deviations that make it a little bit less direct, a little bit less streamlined. So there's a couple of key changes. One is here closer to downtown, there's a medical community center. What is the name of that medical center? So there's a medical center. Yeah, family. Yep. So in this scenario, it's linked to the it's linked to the Borges Medical Center here. And I'm not sure how much activity, how much of a kind of need there is for that connection, but the benefit of making this connection is that it creates a transfer opportunity, a couple of different transfer opportunities in scenario 1. So let me show what I mean there. So here we have a transfer opportunity where the two routes, Route 6 and Route 7, create there's a point where they kind of intersect. That doesn't exist today. The current alignment looks like this, where there's a gap between the two routes, and by bringing the Route 9 up this way to Patterson Street, it creates a transfer opportunity. So it looks like this. The two kind of cross over each other. The other thing on Route 9 is that it does not serve Avenue H or Sprinkle Road, because those are picked up instead by Route 5. So Route 9 is a much more streamlined alignment, focused on Gull Road in this area here.
That's a pretty high volume route for us, isn't it? Top 5, right, Sean? Yeah. So I just wonder that maneuver to bring it north and then east on Patterson, whereas instead it could go onto Harrison and then Gull Street, which is the section that's west of River Drive. That section going north, that seems like a lot of would add a lot of time to a high volume route, not a lot of ridership. Or maybe
I
I'm
think
wrong.
there may be more ridership than going downtown, plus we avoid the railroad tracks on the west side of downtown, which are a problem, have been a problem in the past.
Okay, that makes sense. To get it up and around that intersection where it stops, yeah, okay.
Is it, I wasn't sure if there's any benefit. So besides what Sean said, is there any benefit of having the link from the family health center? Are people ever kind of referred from one facility to the other, to the Gull Road Borges Healthcare Facility?
I don't know
They're
if those two
completely
are.
independent. If they're independent facilities.
Yeah, they're not, I don't think they're linked.
Okay.
Might be an occasional referral, but I don't know, is Family Health Center linked to Bronson or Borges more than the, no, okay.
Right. Yeah. So the other benefit was that with Route 6, there's, residential connections on Route 6 that right now, in order to get out to the hospital on Gull Road, they have to go into downtown and then make a connection. So this creates an opportunity by crossing these two routes where somebody could sort of take a bit of a shortcut. It's not a huge benefit probably, but we wanted to throw that out there to see if there was any response from the public on that. But that's kind of the logic behind this alignment versus the current Route 9 alignment.
One group that I do hear that might not be represented here, the medical school students and residents, a lot of them live downtown and their classroom facilities are downtown. They could walk to Bronson, but it's harder to get to Borges. So any way to promote that bus service to Borges for medical school work or residency work might be beneficial. And maybe the family health center, I don't know. But linking those medical facilities might make sense.
Okay.
I don't know if
So
there's
that,
any way to make it. There's no easy way from the medical school now, I think, from their campus to get out to Borges.
okay. We'll see what folks say in the survey. Okay, let's look at Route 9. I'm sorry, let's look at Route 10. Yeah, we just talked about 9. Okay, so Route 10 has a pretty substantial change. So the current Route 10 looks like this, and the alignments essentially are the same until you get to River Street. So they operate along Comstock Avenue the same. The current route then heads north from Comstock Avenue. The current route heads north, and it ends up at the Walmart. The proposed alignment heads south and serves a lot of job access opportunities. So the main reason for this is that when we looked at ridership, let me turn that on real quick. This is a fairly dead zone. So north of Comstock was a fairly dead zone. There just wasn't a whole lot of ridership out there. Whereas if you head south, there are greenhouses and just a lot of job access opportunities potentially along River Street. So if this isn't working, then let's try something else, and let's make this a job access route to the south instead of to the north. The opportunity, the other thing that this route would do is it would pick up the connection to MCR Industries, which we talked about earlier, being dropped from the Route 8. And it serves all the industrial destinations on Midlink Drive instead of the Gull Road Walmart. Any thoughts about that? Switching the end of the line to points south instead of points north?
I don't see it.
Okay. Here, there's another change is the alignment through downtown. And again, here we are trying to provide closer access to medical destinations versus the current alignment, which kind of just, gets you out of downtown a bit faster, but with few access. And again, we see the ridership just really isn't there in the current alignment, which would suggest maybe trying a different alignment. Okay, then that's scenario one. In scenario two, it's similar, but it just takes a slight different turn. So it still heads south, but instead of heading out all the way on Comstock Avenue, instead it turns south on Olmsted Road. So this part of Comstock Avenue is dropped in scenario two. This is not a high ridership area. In addition to that, it would be covered by the microtransit service. So any lost ridership here, on the one hand, it's fairly low ridership. On the other hand, they would have the opportunity to use microtransit instead. So that's the difference between the scenario one and scenario two alignment.
Randy, any thoughts on that? I mean, that's the core of Comstock, right? That would be not have service there.
Replacement to microtransit service.
Right. I think they just think about the impact of that.
Yeah. So again, if we look at we talked earlier about the high school up there that has very low ridership, but really there are no high ridership stops along North 26th Street. The only area that we do see ridership is up at the Walmart. So that's the main driver here for this proposed change. Actually, it's not the Walmart, it's the Meijer.
Can I see the Route 10 again for scenario 2?
Sure. So it's just like scenario one, except it turns south sooner. So here's scenario one, here's scenario two.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay.
Where they have instituted microtransit in other communities, do they see increased usage of transit in general?
So there's no one story that kind of fits. Everyone has a different experience, but in many cases, microtransit is being implemented in areas where the ridership is already very low. And so what ends up happening is you commit a bus to a particular corridor today, and that corridor is picking up very few people, and you can't really stretch beyond that corridor because people are only willing to walk a certain distance. So microtransit allows you to cast a wider net in that corridor or in a larger corridor, and until your ridership picks up to sort of a higher level, microtransit is often the more effective way to go. Microtransit doesn't carry lots and lots of people as efficiently as fixed route service, but until you hit the threshold of, let's say, more than 8 passengers per hour, then microtransit often is much more efficient as a service model until you do hit that threshold. So there are areas that have implemented microtransit, especially in university settings where they've seen very, very high ridership. A lot of universities are now moving toward microtransit, especially in the evening hours, and those are carrying very heavy loads. But in many other cases, they're being implemented in areas that are already inherently low ridership areas. And so rather than committing fixed route resources to those areas, you instead can use microtransit, which you can commingle the riders with paratransit service. So you don't have to have a separate paratransit service. You can transport the paratransit riders along with the general public with a microtransit model.
Well, what I'm wondering, in areas where you have low transit ridership today, when you institute microtransit by having that broader net, do you see greater participation, or you're serving more people?
You're serving more people for sure, because you're able to cast a much wider net. So I think some of the best examples I would say is the area that we talked about that Route 6 currently serves, the G Avenue area. there you're just seeing much lower ridership than we would expect given the land use. We know that there's apartment complexes. Typically apartment complexes would generate high ridership, but we're not seeing that ridership. And I think that part of that is because people don't feel comfortable walking to bus stops. If they were given the option of having a service that goes more inside their complexes more directly, then I think you would see higher ridership than you are currently on the fixed route service.
Okay. Go ahead, Christian. Two questions. I guess these are probably for you, Sean. Number one, the video that we're recording today, can we make that available to board members to review later when we're filling out the survey?
That's why it's being recorded.
And then number two, Boris, you have a lot of data on the system you're using now to demonstrate things to us. I'd like to do a good job providing you feedback. I'll do probably worse than you could do on your own if I don't have some of the same information you're pulling up, like ridership by stop. Is that available to board members at all, or is this kind of like outside of the scope of what we're going to be able to see?
We can certainly make it available. The information came to us from Kalamazoo Metro, so we can certainly provide it right back. We've processed it a little bit to make it more easy to present, but certainly I can share the information in all kinds of ways. You can, we can do it via Kalamazoo staff, or you can reach out to me directly if you prefer.
Boris, you had those nice data sheets per stop. You want to just pull one of those up? I think that's a nice summary.
Yeah. I need a minute to pull them up, but I can certainly show those. Yeah, give me just a second. Yeah, we did the diagnostic route profiles that looked at every route by stop and by trip. Here we go. So this is what they look like. Okay. And these were kind of the foundation for developing our recommendations. So as we went through these, we looked at ridership by every trip for every route, and then by every stop for every route. And based on that, we developed these strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. And those opportunities are what we're now talking about in these scenarios. In some cases, we put some of the opportunities into scenario 1, others into scenario 2, and that's how we developed the current networks that we're talking about, the preliminary networks that we're talking about. But we can share this packet for sure. And we can share it. We have this for every route, and we can share it in this format, or in the format that you see on the screen here, where if you have Google Earth, you can just click on any stop and see what's happening, boardings, lightings, and so on.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for providing considered feedback as opposed to just amateur feedback. So thanks.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Route 11. Okay, we talked a bit about 11 already. We talked about how 11 would connect downtown through to Western Michigan. A couple other changes in the downtown area right now, Route 11 does it has a lot of one-way service. In other words, buses going inbound are several blocks away from the alignment of buses going outbound, and that's not the best practice. Typically, if you have service that's operating on one street in one direction and on another street in the other direction, you want those to be about a block apart, so that if somebody gets off on one stop, they can very easily find the opposite stop to go back. So what we've done is we've moved the service to South Street and Lovell Street in order to get the alignments closer to one another. This also has the benefit of getting closer to the library. I believe it's the library. Yeah, Kalamazoo Public Library is there. So this gets us closer to another key destination versus the existing alignment. Now, we already talked about access through the university. This deviation to get to the university would be on both on outbound and on inbound trips. I believe currently this deviation only happens on inbound trips, but outbound trips do not go into the university and instead stay on Stadium Drive. And then the two other changes on Route 11. One is a deviation into Century Avenue. So this is again to strengthen Century Avenue as this hub, this emerging hub where people can make connections to other routes. Then the final change is the circulation at the end of the route as it's serving KVCC. The idea here on Route 11 is that the Groves campus, which is here, is now going to be, there's some roadway work that I believe is now complete that connects the Groves campus to O Avenue. So we have an alignment here that goes through the Groves campus and then onto the main KVCC campus and on all trips. So if we turn off the existing service, it looks like this. And then it goes back the same way. So that's scenario one, and scenario two is actually the same for Route 11. No difference between the two scenarios on Route 11.
Forrest, is there ridership inside of that Groves area that you're seeing?
Let me look. I think that I'm trying to remember if it was previously served. Let me just turn that on. Okay. So we have some ridership, not heavy, but in fairness, there wasn't a great way before to get to the Groves campus and then from the Groves campus onto the main campus. So I think if there is an opportunity to serve them on every trip, I think the ridership potential is fairly high. We met with folks from KVCC. They told us that there are people that travel between the two campuses. So there is kind of a ready market for students to travel between the two.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll defer to the KVCC leadership. You got an unprotected left turn there onto O Avenue that probably adds, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes to the route going through the Groves. I can't imagine there's a lot outside of linking the two campus buildings together. The two KVCC buildings. The other buildings those two buildings on the north end are large office buildings, and the one on the south end of the Groves Drive is a fitness facility. And then there is the KVCC building kind of near your cursor.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's active classes or not.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, Groves.
I've been to events, but I don't usually see students there, but there are students.
I took a class of hip hop a couple weeks ago at the Groves.
And you wish you had had transit service.
I did not need it.
Your hip hop class. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
So moving on to Route 12. Let's turn this off. Okay, so Route 12 is a fairly long route, kind of a circuitous and long route. It's a route that isn't intended to really have. This is a route that is really a collection of segments. So very few people would likely ride this route all the way through. And let me bring up the current route just for context, just so you can see. This is the current Route 12. It is the current route that does serve the airport area. So in our case, for Route 12 in scenario 1, we're proposing Crossroads Mall as the end of the line. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to link a lot of educational facilities, to a lot of schools, a lot of high schools, to destinations that may be appealing and attractive to those riders. So the YMCA, for example, Crossroads Mall, for example, grocery stores. These are all job access opportunities for this demographic. Working at the YMCA, working at grocery stores, working at the mall potentially, or just hanging out at all those places. And so what we have is we have a connection. We have Phoenix High School. No, okay, so yeah, is that right? Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah, the Phoenix High School is here. You have YMCA here. There's other high schools here. You have Lloyd Norris High School here, and you have the connection to the mall. So multifamily housing, retail destinations, several educational facilities, and then the YMCA. So this is a route that kind of connects the dots to a lot of different educational facilities and the types of places that students may want to go. So any thoughts on this route?
You're gonna drive the bus up Wheaton. That's on there right now.
That's a wicked hill.
That's a really steep, on the north end of the route, right near your cursor, yeah, Wheaton. Is the east-west route on the north end of that leg. It's really steep and it's brick.
Yeah, 30%. Yeah, that's quite a grade.
So the north end right now.
Yeah, right here. Yeah, right here.
You might be better off Merrill, going east and then south on Merrill.
Merrill, okay.
So if you go east as you're coming down Davis, which is the north-south street, there in your image, and then turn east on Wheaton, and then south on Merrill. Merrill goes all the way to Howard. You wouldn't, although you'd miss the Phoenix school.
You'd miss the Phoenix school, right? Yeah, this was a kind of a dilemma because we did want to get the Phoenix.
Austin.
Say again?
Austin Street, which
Austin?
is 2 blocks north. Yeah,
just north of there.
That's less steep. I mean, slightly, not quite as long.
Yeah. So let's see. Austin Street would be a left turn. I believe that Oakland. So there's a signal here. The Wheaton has a signal.
Yes, Davis is not. Austin and Davis. Austin is not. You're right.
No, Austin does not have a signal. So that was a dilemma there. Yeah, I mean, this is often what happens. Like there's, you got to pick your poison. Either you don't have a signal or you have a brick road. So, or you missed the high school. Yeah, we can look into this some more. I mean, there's other options. There's one option is basically to try to come down Oakland Drive and not kind of get into the neighborhoods as much. There's that has its maybe operational benefits, but it misses a lot of ridership opportunities, the library included. In this case, again, you link the library to the YMCA, to the schools. But is this brick road? I know there are other brick roads in your community that I believe do have bus service. So
yeah, it's the grade that's the problem. In addition to the grade, it's extremely steep. All 3 of those roads that connect up to Oakland.
It would be a problem with the wintertime. It would be really bad.
Okay.
But just look at it. You're coming on site for us. You said you're going to be in town.
Yep.
Well, yeah, just take a look at it and you can assess.
Bring your sled. Well, we're keeping them in summer.
Or bring your bike and try to bike it.
That sounds
Yeah.
What route number is this that we're looking at? I'm making a note.
12. 12. Yeah.
I like all the connections on that route though. That really makes that line, it links a lot more.
Is El Sol Elementary School there?
Yeah, it's on that line,
KCTA?
and Kansas too, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been really focusing on the elementary schools. They don't generate the ridership that high schools tend to generate, but there are several other schools on this route other than those high schools that I mentioned.
Well, there's the KCTA is Math and Science Center, which is on that route on the north end in the Vine neighborhood. So I think you've got KCTA, Phoenix, Hackett, and Boynorix, all high schools.
Yep.
On that line.
And
At least
yeah.
that.
Okay. Well, we'll have to revisit Wheaton and see what other option we can come up with. But yeah. But again, really great feedback. This is the kind of stuff we want to hear. Okay, let's move on then. Okay, we talked a little bit about Route 13 in the context of serving the Alcott Street DHHS facility. What else did I want to say on Route 13? So this is another route that would now operate through to Crossroads Mall. It's also now providing a link to the Milham Meadows apartments. I believe that's a lower income area. So what we've done here is we've linked them to the mall. We've linked them to the Meijer on Westnedge. The way that this route goes through Westnedge is it uses Old Kilgore. This is easier because you're making a right turn. Like we talked earlier about Route 1 having to make a left turn onto Kilgore, but in this case you make a right turn out of Old Kilgore onto Kilgore. From Kilgore you make a left onto Old Kilgore, but it's only one direction of traffic that you have to yield to. But this route swaps segments with Route 2 in order to provide that Alcott connection and at the same time reduce out of direction travel. The route is extended from its current end of the line, which is the Meijer, down to the Crossroads Mall. And the reason it's extended is not only to serve the mall, but also to pick up service to the Milham Meadows apartments. So.
Of course, I've got a question for you on Milham Meadows. It looks like maybe 26 and 4 on our current maps actually drive through there. Is that what you're thinking with this Route 2 or routes that will serve that area? Or no?
Yeah, that's true. So the current routes 26 and 27, or 26 does. I don't think the 27 does, but the current route 26 drives through there. In this case, I'm not proposing to go through the apartments because they are fairly compact and fairly walkable. Like it's a half a block from an exit to this intersection. So this is something we can revisit again, but it's always, if you can avoid going inside of an apartment complex, it's always better to avoid it. The question is just, is it reasonable to expect people to walk the half block or so to a bus stop location? You could have a stop here, you could have a stop here. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's possible. It's less convenient for those folks living there, but in service of a more efficient overall system, might be worth it. The city of Portage also owns the corner lots, I think, on those intersections, so we might have a friendly partner if we wanted to do something in terms of a nice, like on the northwest side of that, a nice place for people to wait for the bus or something.
Northwest and southeast, right?
And southeast, yeah, northwest and southeast is owned by the city.
Yeah. Right, so a bus coming south would be in the turn lane, so it would have to stop here, like it would have to stop on Milham. A bus heading north could stop here or could stop here, but probably you would want it to stop. Well, this is a turn lane as well, so you probably would want to have the northbound stop here and the southbound stop here.
Yeah,
so this is city.
That may be why we drive through, is these are a little bit hairy of intersections. That stretch across Oakland Drive there is probably 6 lanes or something. So it could be difficult for people to get to where they need to board the bus.
But it's got to
so wide.
It's got to be
okay.
Moving up on Oakland Drive too, right? To go left on Oakland. Is that what it does, or does it come down and around?
So if this route were to go through the apartments, the easiest thing to do is to stay south in Oakland until you get to Mallard, because then you can make a right turn. You can make a right turn in and then a right turn out. So it just basically be a little loop, and then you continue on your way.
Yeah, think about that. Maybe that might make sense to do. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing that we throw out there to see how much pushback there is. So when we, when the public gets their hands on this, if they start pushing back, that's a pretty easy change. But we wanted to take it out at this point to see if they're going to fight for it.
I think it brings up a good point too, that there's some private property and some private partners that are kind of being proposed in some of these changes that we probably need to sit down with and figure out how to accommodate some of the either enhanced load or change in location. I can't speak on everybody's behalf, but the Century Avenue area, there is no spot to do that right now. So with running 4 or 5 routes through there, we probably need to engage the appropriate parties on that one and some others.
Yeah, we heard. Yeah.
I can provide a contact at Century Avenue, yes.
I have.
Wearing that hat of an owner and not knowing this in advance, you're going to be surprised to see 5 routes now running through a private road. So,
yep.
and that's the case at a couple of locations that I've seen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This, a little bit of context, we got the Century Avenue discussion started when we met with drivers, with the Kalamazoo Metro drivers. They told us that operating along Stadium Drive, for example, on Route 11, is really, they get no ridership out of there, and they hear from riders a desire to go through Century Avenue. It's a difficult connection from Stadium Drive to get to Costco, to get to Trader Joe's. And so this is something that came out of that discussion. I agree, it's probably something worth discussing with the property. But yeah, that emerged from our meetings with the drivers. I think it's a good idea.
Logical spot to think about it. Just there's logistics on the ground of how does that happen every day with all those routes, and where does that bus actually stop, or those buses. But you're right, there is no sidewalk right now on either side of Drake Road from Stadium up to Century. So that movement is really challenging for us.
Right.
I know it's in the works on at least the west side of Drake Road. And
right.
Maybe two.
Okay, let me quickly. So just real quick on scenario 2, looking at Route 13 on scenario 2, so it's a little bit different because of the microtransit service, but not only the microtransit service. We actually proposed a separate route. We haven't gotten there yet, but Route 26 would make that connection in scenario 2 between the apartments and the retail destination. So the Meijer on one end, the mall, and then actually the other Meijer and Walmart continuing through. But this Route 26 kind of in scenario 2 connects the dots between a lot of portage destinations. So that was just a bit of a preview there. Let's talk about 14. Okay, so the current Route 14 looks like this. It heads out on West Main. It serves the Maple Hill Pavilion facility, serves the Walmart and the Meijer, and then it ends up at the library. This is the Kalamazoo Public Library Ashtamo branch, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. In scenario 1, we dropped the service to the library. It's a very low ridership destination. And we tried to streamline service a little bit through the pavilion and the Walmart and the Meijer. So this is a case of going into the facility. So because of the way that street signal, there is or is not a signalized intersection, we're proposing that as the bus is heading outbound, as it's heading westbound, it comes all the way to Maple Hill Drive and then does this loop so that it can make a right turn onto West Main Street. Then there is a new signalized intersection. I believe there's a new credit union here, and I believe this might be signalized now, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so buses can come and go through this intersection without any trouble. So we come in this way, serve the Meijer, head down. There's a signal again at 9th and Main. So cross the signal here, turn around at the Walmart, and then head back the same way. And then in the Maple Hill Pavilion, because it'll be a right turn out, you can go in this way and then make a, oh no, sorry, that's a left turn. Okay, so here you have to, I believe we had it going this way and then making a right turn at the protected, or a left turn at the protected intersection. So it's all about finding those protected intersections, basically. Okay, so that's that scenario.
What ridership numbers were there from? Because that little piece from Meyer to the library, that's new. How long has that been on?
It'll be a year in August.
Yeah, so the ridership was very low. We had about two people a day using that in 2021. It didn't exist in 2019. In 2021, it had about 2 people a day.
But then that would be served by microtransit.
Exactly. In scenario 2, that would be served by microtransit. Yep. And then scenario.
That's one of my own minds. It's a trade-off in parts of the community where you go from a dedicated line service that they see to something that's a microtransit, and may not be as visible to people. Maybe we want to make sure that it is visible, because we do have to demonstrate to the public what we're doing. And our riders are, by and large, riders, not choice riders. They're riders who are transit dependent. When we look at all the changes that you're proposing, how do we know? And we've had a lot of discussion about this route or that route, or this change more efficient. But how much more effective is it in serving those populations in our community that are transit dependent, that are low income, don't have any other choice but to use transit?
Yeah. So great question. What we've tried to do is ensure that every single route has access to the kind of the key destinations that people need to live their daily lives, to the grocery stores, to pharmacies, and so on. In some cases, we connected it to, we had this discussion earlier, like, is Trader Joe's the right grocery store? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But in general, we've tried to ensure that every route has good access to those basics of life. And in that regard, I think that we've done a fairly good job at serving those transit-dependent riders. Of course, some people have their preferences. Some people have the things that they're used to. They're used to going to one grocery store, and now they're going to have access to a different grocery store. So there may be some pushback, and we'll hear what people have to say, and we'll make adjustments if needed. But the two scenarios overall, they differ in that the first one tries to keep the same fixed route footprint for the most part. In other words, the overall coverage area of fixed route service in scenario 1 is very, very similar to the current service. Some of the segments of routes have been swapped, so they go from one route to a different route, but the overall footprint in scenario 1 is very, very similar to the current service. And then in scenario 2, the footprint is a bit smaller, and instead we supplement that with microtransit service. But in terms of coverage for the transit-dependent riders, I think both scenarios provide fairly robust coverage to the areas that have the highest need for service and the areas that have the highest potential to support service.
Well, we know geographically where low-income neighborhoods are. And
we do.
How can we show that to people that we're making sure that those areas who are principal customers are being served best? Yep.
So up to now, I've been showing what's called transit potential. So transit potential is density. So it doesn't matter if you have an apartment community that is fairly high end or low end. The main factor is density, because density drives transit ridership. But we also can look at transit need. So transit need is looking at those specific population groups that tend to have a higher need for mobility assistance. So low-income populations, people without automobiles, and the like. So we have that information too. When we come up with our preferred scenario, one of the exercises we're going to do is we're going to overlay the preferred scenario onto this map and the transit potential map to show that places that have the highest need for service are still served, and this is how they're still served. So just as an example, here's the scenario 1 map. There's very few places that have high transit need that are not served in this scenario. And then if we look at scenario 2, again, most of them are served, and then on top of that, we have the microtransit. So everything that's remaining is really, has fairly low transit need, or is outside of the urbanized area. So we've certainly tried to incorporate that information on where the need is greatest and provide service to those folks.
Now, in relation to the microtransit, have you seen where they roll that out like 6 months before to get people familiar with it? Because if people don't know something about it, they're gonna talk a whole lot about it without knowing anything about it. So if you see where they roll out 6 months before, so that way they have a better basis of knowledge of how that's going to work before we actually do the bus lines changes, because that's always going to be the upheaval of the whole system when we do that. But have you seen that done that way where it's been successful?
Oh yeah.
Or,
oh yeah. I mean, that goes really for any service change, whether it's microtransit or even fixed route. You always have to have a marketing period where you introduce people to it in advance. Usually microtransit service starts as a fare free service for, the first couple of weeks to let people get used to it, things like that, to, create a buzz. That's pretty standard practice. So I agree. You definitely have to build in time for marketing. I also want to say that, most likely the final recommendation will be some combination of what you see here. It may not be all 4 of these microtransit zones. Maybe only the Portage zone makes sense, because the Portage zone is kind of the one that has the lowest density today, has fairly low transit need today. So it may not be that you have all 4 of these zones. It may be a combination of scenario 1 for some of the areas and then scenario 2 for others. So just throwing that out there as well.
No, we'll keep the microtransit national.
Hey Boris, while you got that picture up, just one quick observation about the Portage microtransit zone, if you want to throw that south one up. It's just that I believe it probably ought to go up Kilgore to Oakland and not follow 94 in this little area in the north section. That's where like Meyer and other things are that people are probably thinking about getting to from Portage.
Right.
Border is not anything that's like meaningful to anybody living in town.
Yeah. So that actually brings up another interesting and important discussion. You always want to balance these microtransit services with not wanting to cannibalize your existing ridership, your existing fixed route ridership. So sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes you do have overlap between fixed route and microtransit service. But I've tried to draw the boundaries to minimize that to the greatest extent possible. But again, that's something that can be modified. We can try different things. One way that you can promote fixed route ridership, but then still use microtransit as sort of a safety net, is have a different fare structure. So the fixed route service may be a lower fare than the microtransit service. You can also do geofencing. So if you're within let's say, quarter mile of a fixed route service, then using microtransit may be available to you, but at a premium cost, versus if you're in an area that has no fixed route service, then the cost could fall to the equivalent of fixed route service. But it's always a little bit of a balancing act to try to ensure that you're not competing too directly with the fixed route service.
So Boris, for an area this size, how many vehicles would be necessary for microtransit?
So this is a good question. The more vehicles, so there's a modeling process that you have to go through to try to understand what the ridership demand is and what wait time you're willing to tolerate. So if you're willing to tolerate a very long wait time, then you may need, you could potentially serve it with one, maybe two vehicles, but then your ridership is going to be very transit dependent because choice riders are very time sensitive. So if you want to attract, choice riders in some of these outlying areas, you have to have reasonable wait times. 30 minutes or less is kind of the rule of thumb. So to have 30-minute or less service in a large service area, you do need to have 3, maybe 4 vehicles operating concurrently to meet demand.
Okay, thank you.
Boris, I've got a question for you. The microtransit software, does that somehow give visibility to the rider? Say I'm going from South Portage and I've got to get to somewhere in North, right? And it requires to take microtransit as well as fixed route. Is there something that walks me through that where I can just say this is my starting point, this is my destination? And an example would be like Google or something where you would actually just put the address in, starting and destination, and it would say, okay, well, you've got to walk to this location, jump on here, it's going to be a bus, it's going to be a train, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's different apps. Google is starting to incorporate microtransit as well in a few markets. I don't think it's, well, obviously you don't have it yet, but I don't think it's available in Michigan yet. But there's also an app called Transit. It's just called the Transit app, and it incorporates. It's active in most communities. It's kind of an open source platform, but it's a trip planning tool that is built around transit service. So you can put in or it knows where you are if you allow your phone to geolocate where you are. If you put in your destination, it'll tell you the options to get from where you are to where you're going via transit. And if microtransit is an option, it'll show you that. It'll tell you the price of that trip. Okay. Now let's move on then to Route 15. Okay, so Route 15, the current Route 15 is a fairly circuitous route. Here we go. So the current Route 15 is a route that has a large one-way segment through the Kalamazoo Township. If we look at ridership, it's not that great up this far north. So what we're proposing on this route, let me turn off. It's a much shorter, simpler route. It's a simplified alignment to reduce the one-way segments. We're eliminating service in Kalamazoo Township or part of Kalamazoo Township due to the low ridership in those areas. So this route, it's very short. Most likely the way that it would operate would be through an interline. What an interline means is that a route that comes downtown would then transition its head sign and do this run and then come back and then get ready for its next run on the other route. We probably would not dedicate a vehicle just to this alignment. It would be joined together through an interline with another route. But if we turn on the points of interest, you can kind of get a sense of why this alignment was chosen. So you have the Family Health Center. So it's a direct shot from downtown to the Family Health Center. Then there's a couple of very large multifamily housing complexes. Interfaith Homes was one of them, the Gladshire Apartments. And then if we look at the ridership, you'll see that we tried to capture the corridors with the highest ridership, and then we dropped the service in the areas that had very low ridership. So this is the simplified 15, and it's the same in both scenarios. Okay.
Has there been any dialogue with graphic packaging, either Sean or Boris? Graphic packaging is the large manufacturing complex to the east of that route, the north end of that route. To the east of it, you can see the industrial buildings. There's about 1,000 employees there, I think. I don't know if is there a direct link into the KTC? Route 6, I guess, goes by on Patterson.
Right. Yeah. So this is the facility here, right?
Yeah. Right.
So there's two stops that serve it. Fairly low ridership today. And then in
Right.
scenario 2, we have the microtransit zone, I believe. Nope. Microtransit kind of tips the northern end of it, but it could be adjusted to include that.
What about Route 6? Can you just put Route 6
Yeah,
right there?
sure.
For
So
both?
this is, yeah. So this is Route 6 in scenario 2. And then Route 6 in scenario 1 follows the same alignment. There's also
Picked up is the new Galt Road route, I think, but what you're proposing for the route, is it 12, Route 9?
Route 9.
Yeah, there it is, okay, so it's covered at Route 9, so that's, okay, it's covered.
Route 9. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on. So Route 16. Turn off. Okay, so we actually talked about the 16 already, but I do want to make another point about the 16, and that is what the current alignment is. I think we did talk about this, but the current alignment of 16 goes into this fairly large apartment complex. It's an area where we would like to propose, at least in scenario 2, to take this further out to the Walmart on 9th. The problem is that the pedestrian environment here is really lacking. There's no sidewalks. The apartments are set really far back from KI Avenue. So how realistic this is, I can't say. Probably not very realistic. But we wanted to throw that out there to see how much support there would be for a service that had a very direct connection to Walmart from campus. Potentially.
And we will have a non-motorized facility going through there by, I think it'll be finished by 2024 because it has to be done in conjunction with that MDOT bridge over 131. But so the facilities will be there. I think it's something that we should keep in mind.
What are they going to look? Is it just sidewalks, or what is it going to be?
Well, yeah, it'll be a non-motorized pathway. It'll be probably a 10-foot pathway. All the way from there all the way down to Drake.
Okay.
It goes from these apartments east to Drake.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So so we'll see how people respond to this, but I think that there would be quite a lot of support for this Michigan to Walmart connection. But it's, it could include this deviation, which the problem with a deviation like that is if you keep it in and then continue further west, is it aggravates all the people that are not trying to get to these apartments because they have to go off the route and then come back in, that kind of thing. So we'll see how this plays with the public. But that's 16. In one scenario, it ends at the apartments. In the other scenario, it continues on to the Walmart.
Yeah, it seems like you could have that stop be out on KL and not go into that apartment complex.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 16. Next is 19. We talked already about the bidirectional service on Ring Road. So I'll just move on from there. Next, we'll talk about the 21 route, which gets split into 2. This, first, let me show you the current 21, and then we can talk. So the current 21 has, do I have another version open somewhere? Yes. Okay, it's a pretty circuitous route because it serves the apartments that are north. So if you're on campus and you jump on the 21, it goes to the Kendall Avenue area. It then returns to campus, and then it continues south and serves 2 areas of off-campus housing south of the university. So the Fraternity Village Drive area here, as well as the Greenwood Avenue area here. So there's a lot of kind of in and out. But one main problem that we saw is that on campus, if a person jumps on the wrong 21, they'll end up in completely opposite directions. And so what we are proposing is to split it into two distinct route numbers. So we're at this point calling it 211 and 212, with 211 going north and 212 going south, mostly to avoid confusion. The 212 portion of it does not serve the Fraternity Village roadway because another route would serve that instead. So we'll talk about that now. So the Route 25, which is this route, which serves, it's a connection from the engineering buildings. Right now, it just goes on Michigan Avenue, but because this is a signalized intersection here at Michigan, and so Fraternity Village is here, it's signalized, and Kenbrook is also signalized. So it's fairly easy to go from Michigan Avenue through here. There's a lot of apartments, a lot of ridership potential, and then head into campus. That makes the 21 simpler. Instead of having the 21 go into this loop and then this loop and then back, all the 21 does is alternates between a northern alignment called the 211 and a southern alignment called the 212. And then 25 picks up the Fraternity Village area. So any thoughts on that?
One broad comment about to me, the numbering is, I kind of follow where the numbering comes from, but if the western oriented routes were numbered like W1, W2, W3, instead of like 221, 222, all these, what feels like kind of random numbers, if you could brand those ones that are right around campus and kind of part of that western package as route W1, W2, W3, it might streamline. As I look at those route numbers, it just feels like a hodgepodge of numbers.
That's right. You're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right about that. The numbers right now, what we've tried to do is we've tried to preserve the family connection. So if a person rides 21 today, we want them to be able to speak to us when we come out there and tell us about the 21 derivatives, right? So if we change the route numbers at this point, it creates a lot of confusing conversations, but we will propose route numbers at the end of the process that may have more logic to them. But right now we're trying to, keep the family connection, so to speak.
Okay, yeah. I just, the idea of branding the western ones together, since they really just hub around western and kind of service the campus area. And we've got some of our buses branded with western logos, and maybe some of those routes can be branded that way too. In general, I hope we think, and it sounds like Boris, you're doing it, think about kind of how do we brand the routes. This is when you look at the map, it's kind of a phase of routes, but if they're branded properly, it might help get people to say, okay, I take this number or this color or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point. We're almost done here, so.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I know probably everybody's probably had enough of this, but 21 and 22 are the same in scenario 1 and scenario 2. 25 is different. So in scenario 1, 25, as I said, goes into this Fraternity Village area, which it currently does not do, which frees up the 211 and 212 to be more streamlined. But in scenario 2, we've added yet another deviation to 25, and that is to take it through the Century Avenue area. So it basically looks like this from the engineering school. You go through Century Avenue, and then you go through the Fraternity Village area, and then campus. And same thing going down. Maybe that's one deviation too many, but we can see what people push back on and tell us that they like or don't like. But that's the difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2, this extra deviation.
There will eventually, there's going to be non-motorized path on Drake Road, so you could potentially have a stop on Drake Road instead of running it through Century Avenue.
Okay. Where exactly is that going to come out onto Drake?
Path is going to run along Drake Road on the west side of the road from Stadium Drive up to an existing path on KL Avenue. So all the way continuing north on your screen, there's the railroad track, to KL.
Okay.
It'll link up to an existing path along the west side of Drake Road. So that'll make
Okay.
it much more accessible.
Oh, that's great to know. Okay. What's the time frame for that?
Our Oshawa Township rep just left, but I think it's 2 years.
24.
Yeah, 24.
Okay.
I know it's been programmed and there's right of way allocated for it, and they're just trying to secure some state grants, I think, to make it, instead of just a regular sidewalk, they want it to be a 10-foot path.
Okay, great. All right, so the last route here that we're going to talk about is 26. And we did talk a little bit about it already, but in scenario 1, 26 is this kind of portage connection. Well, let me show you the current 26 just to give context. The current 26 and the current 27 are very, very circuitous. They're very large one-way loops. And the ridership, neither one of them has very strong ridership. And they're trying to be kind of like a safety net, trying to do everything for everyone in that very large area that they serve, but they're not really serving anyone very well because of how much out of direction travel they force, which is what happens when you have a one-way loop. So what we've tried to do instead is in scenario 1, we've tried to make a bi-directional route that still has a fairly large coverage area. So it's anchored on one end to the mall, to Crossroads Mall. It runs along Romance. It serves some medical facilities and apartment complexes along Center Avenue. And then it serves the Meijer and the Walmart. And then at the end of the line, it kind of does a loop through several apartment complexes. There's several multifamily housing complexes on the south side of Portage. So this is, if I turn on the ridership, you can kind of get a sense. Oops, that's not the right one. You kind of see that we're trying to do a bit of a connect the dots in this, but it's bi-directional. So that's very different than the current service. The current service is not bi-directional. Then in scenario 2, it has it's similar process, but it's a little bit less ambitious. So it is providing service over a smaller area, smaller coverage area of Portage, but it's backed up by the microtransit zone. So given that there's a microtransit zone, it was less important to try to cast as wide of a net. And instead, what scenario 2 does is it connects to the highest ridership stops, including the Mallard apartment area here. And then it leaves some of the lower ridership for microtransit service. So that is 26. 27 was eliminated in both scenarios. In scenario 2, it's covered by microtransit service. In scenario 1, it's covered by segments of other fixed route service. So that's where we are. And then, like I said at the beginning, you guys, when you go home, you can see this all maybe in more close-up detail through the survey site. You can scroll and look at any route. You just go down this list, and you can see the very same information we discussed with scenario 1 of every route and scenario 2 of every route. And then the colors, the blue, are showing things that are different between scenario 1 and scenario 2, so you can very quickly point those out.
So now we're through this. You're gonna have a survey site up in a week or so.
The survey site is almost ready to go. We're just waiting for final sign off by Kathy, and then we'll get it up maybe by the end of this week.
At the end of this, what will be the fiscal impact of these changes?
Yeah, great question. So the way that this is going now is we started with coverage. We need to understand from the public and other stakeholders where they want service to run. Once we have that nailed down, then we start developing schedules. And the schedules plus the coverage define the cost of the service. Because if we want 30-minute service across the day on a route, then that's going to have a cost implication versus having 30 minutes during only the peak periods or having hourly service. So we're going to have to go through this iterative process of, okay, here's what we're hearing from people where they want service. Here's the frequency of service we would recommend. And then here's where we come out in terms of the total operating cost. If we are above the target if we're above, let's say, cost neutral for the operating cost, then we will come back and say, okay, we can't make all of these recommendations in the short term, so we can phase them in over time. For example, maybe we add service to an area that doesn't have service today. Maybe we add it as an hourly service, but then over time we can upgrade that to 30-minute service. So this is kind of the first step, but the next step is going to be very iterative, where we go back and forth and we try to find the balance between coverage, frequency, and cost.
When you've been in other places where they instituted microtransit service, how was it viewed by the public? As a step up in service or a step down in service?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really depends on who you ask, because when you have people who are used to the existing system, they often will say, okay, this is a step down, because now I can't just walk out to the bus stop that I know and just catch the bus when I know it's supposed to come. Instead, I have to pull out my phone, I have to, make my trip request and so on. But when you talk to people who are not current riders, then they oftentimes do see the value of a microtransit service, because there's a reason they're not current riders. And sometimes the reason is they don't feel comfortable going out to a bus stop. They don't feel comfortable with the walk that entails and the wait that entails. So it really depends on who you ask. Existing riders sometimes give more pushback versus prospective riders who are usually more accepting. But overall, there has to be an education process, because whenever we come out to communities, when we propose any changes, even if it doesn't include any microtransit service, there's always pushback by the existing riders, because they are used to what they know. Even if what they know is really ineffective, really inefficient, it's what they know and what they feel comfortable with. So there's always this education process. But I guess, your original question, it really depends who you ask, if they're existing riders or prospective riders.
Any further questions for us here? Well, we'll know then in another week or so, when we have the survey instrument up and live, and we'll make sure everybody here knows when it's available and how they can access it, and we'll watch that. I'm interested in this. The concept of microtransit service is really intriguing. I know what my experience was when I went from being in a big city and have to rely on a taxi versus Uber. Uber was much more convenient because I knew where it was, when it was, and what I could expect. I didn't have to flag anything down. I'm not sure how you transition from a fixed route system to a microtransit system effectively in a community, but it has been done, so there certainly is experience out there. Behind us, I was thinking always of the next village election. We position ourselves to be able to say we provided better service or not, and that, because the most important thing this authority does is pass villages to support the system. If we don't have a village, we don't have anything. So.
Yeah. I think that the discussion about the millage, something like a microtransit service in some communities helps to start a conversation with expanding the service to areas that don't currently have service today, because some of the outlying communities may not be interested in a millage, because they don't see the service as something that really is compelling for their, the traditional fixed route transit service is something that's compelling for their residents, but they still might have some mobility needs nevertheless. So microtransit is sometimes a good tool to start a conversation with a community about millage and about expansion in the future.
Well, when we first expanded our service in the city of Portage and we developed Route 26, at the time I was concerned that it didn't look like it was a route that was going to garner much ridership because of the neighborhoods that it was going in, those areas that it was serving. not too many transit-dependent areas that it was serving. But yeah, it was important for us to provide that service in Portage to demonstrate to the voters the service was there. Going forward, you take away some fixed route service and institute microtransit service. You still have to be able to demonstrate to the public what you're doing and secure their support.
Yeah.
And maybe this provides much better support to those folks in Portage and or other areas where we have microtransit that you would provide it. I don't know.
You know, one thing that you could do, I could provide you guys a list of Michigan communities that have fairly recently implemented microtransit service. Maybe you guys could, you know, if you're interested, you could set up some case study type calls where you speak to their board members or their staff members and see how their experience was, because many communities in Michigan have recently implemented this. Bata, which is up in North Michigan. What's the name of that community?
Traverse City.
Sorry?
Traverse City.
Traverse City. Right. Traverse City. So they recently implemented microtransit service. Muskegon recently implemented microtransit service. Smart implemented it in some of the suburbs around Detroit. Grand Rapids implemented microtransit service. So there's a lot of case studies just in Michigan, and not only in Michigan. So it's, you know, maybe worth having some of those conversations to see how their communities fared after that.
Randy, other question?
Just two things I look at, we're talking efficient, effective, and trying to keep those two blended together.
Yeah.
That's very hard.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't want us to lose especially people that need the service going to something else.
Right. If I bend one way or the other, I'm going to bend more towards effective service than efficient service, because we're a public entity and our job is to be a business. Our job is to serve people and make sure that transportation is equally available to people. And that's why I was asking the question earlier about how well do we serve areas where we know we have low-income households.
Yeah, and our intent is to serve them as well or better moving forward, and so that's, you know, what we want to hear from everybody over the course of this month on what works and what doesn't work for them in these proposals, and then we will make our adjustments accordingly.
We have a lot of parking in Kalamazoo, so you don't have a lot of transit choice riders because parking's available everywhere you go.
Right.
Yeah, Boris, how long is the survey going to be live?
Through the end of the month. So we're going to launch it in the next couple of days. We'll really push it hard on the 17th and the 18th, get people to take it then or soon thereafter. And then we intend to keep it up until the end of the month. We'll monitor the response rate. So if it looks like it's still kind of growing, if the response rate is growing toward the end of the month, we can keep it open another week or two after that. But oftentimes there's a big spike right after public meetings, and then it just, you know, gradually declines after that. But we'll keep monitoring it.
Boris, how will the community know that it's there?
So Kathy, if she's in the room, I think she was planning to post it on the website, to the Kalamazoo Metro website, along with announcements for the public meeting. So that's the first way people will hear about it. But the main, I think we expect the knowledge to really grow during the week of the public meetings, because we'll be talking a lot about the survey then.
So timeline right now is that, so next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, there is the first of the public meetings, so 9:30 to 11 o'clock, we're gonna have a public meeting here. There'll be a second public meeting that's scheduled from 5:30 to 7. Both of those are gonna be noticed. We're gonna be getting information out on the buses actually tomorrow for those meetings, so that information's there, so that the riders are there and they can prepare for it as well. We are going to be recording the public meeting in the morning session, so that we can have it available to be able to put that up on Facebook as well as our website, just kind of as similar to what you guys are saw today with Boris kind of explaining things, you know, explaining what the routes are. There won't be as much engagement, obviously, because we want to really try to get that information out to what it is, and then we want the public to kind of react to it, but not necessarily the interactive Q&A stuff that's on, because I want to be able to get a good, clean recording of what it is that we're proposing to do. having that information available with that. The Tuesday, Boris is scheduled to meet with the drivers for about 2 hours to again go back through and do the same thing that you're doing today. That will be actually a very interactive Q&A time period as well too with them. We'll probably get a lot of comments and feedback from the drivers as well too. I have a set of maps that we've already done. We'll probably do a couple other sets of maps and have those available for our drivers to have to kind of take and chew on stuff. Because as with you guys, a lot of stuff's coming out, a lot of questions, a lot of what ifs and stuff like that, and we want to hear that information from all levels. In addition to doing, kind of the formal meetings as well, I'm going to be available as well as some of the staff to be over at the transportation center and interacting with our riders. And they also will probably include, because COVID's kind of relaxed a little bit more, is interacting with riders on the buses. Kind of having the conversations of, okay, how do you feel about your route today? If it went to here, what would you, what are your thoughts about? How we could streamline the processes. So having some more conversations, but then also saying, not everybody's going to be able to jump online and be able to fill out a survey. Giving people other avenues for them to be able to interact with staff and being able to provide information and comments. So, so that's kind of it. Social media, so Facebook, Twitter will be out there as well. I am looking at for a possible place up on campus as well too, probably Root Hall, just to kind of have some information available to students as well, to try to get them to get their engagement. And then working with Keisha too on some other locations that we may be able to get some additional information out, to have people do surveys or be able to get some feedback.
When's the student interaction?
So I haven't got that scheduled yet, but I will let people know.
They're not here anymore.
What's that?
They're not here anymore.
You still have, you got students up on campus.
Well, I know, but it's like a third of them.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, we're gonna get a good sampling, and you're probably gonna hear from the students that are, they're here year round.
Yeah, but the that are here are using the bus.
The ones that are here are using the
Right.
bus. Yeah, I mean, they're using the system as it is. I mean, we have a lot of international students.
Yeah,
that are
it's
still
better
here
to
as well,
have a
too.
third than not have any.
Right, yeah.
Just
So,
to be
and we still have a lot of traffic happening up on Root Hall right now still too, especially the Parkview campus and with Health and Human Services still have a pretty strong writing.
Yeah, I think it's great to get the students engaged.
Valley dining would be a great place to get students.
Yeah, so.
Because not only do they go there to eat, and it's open all summer this year, because Bernhard Center is closing. So they need to keep a food service, so, not only do they go there to eat, they go there to study, and,
So yeah, so you'll start seeing some information and public outreach, stuff like that, probably starting tomorrow. Because I usually try to give a week to the passengers on when we're gonna have our public meeting so that they can plan their work schedules and stuff around.
Thank you, Boris. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah, please
Warren.
please take the survey when you get a chance to. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
There was unanimous vote for adjournment.
Oh.
Yeah, I heard a loud clear.
yeah, loud and clear.
Like an hour ago. Let us show that